We're talking wide receivers. We had Tyler Johnson, we had Rashad Bateman. Do we have the next NFL guy on this roster? Quite possibly. Let's go through the Gophers wide receivers and see what we're thinking with this group across the Big Ten.
Hey,
You are Locked On Golden Gophers.
No matter what we're going to do here, we're just going to keep rowing.
Your daily podcast on the Minnesota Golden Gophers.
However it turns out, we're just going to keep rowing.
Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
We're just going to keep rowing, and keep rowing.
You're listening to Locked On Golden Gophers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Kane Rob, host of the podcast, former collegiate football video coordinator and recruiting assistant, here to talk football with you each and every day of the week. Now, it's not just football. We'll talk basketball, women's basketball, men's basketball, hockey. We'll talk all of that as they approach, but it's fall sports. It's football season, and it's time to get to that good old sweet Golden Gophers football. Today, we're talking wide receivers. We've previously been talking other positional breakdowns, and we will go across the entire roster, but we are talking wide receivers today. Let's jump right into it because this one, there's a lot of guys to talk through. So I want to hop right in. I don't want to waste any time. And the first thing we're going to talk about, as always, is the departures. Now, the departures for this season, we lost Doug Emilion to Kansas. He transferred. Jonathan Mann transferred to Winona State, Division II. Brady Boyd transferred to Texas Tech. Larry Wright transferred to Missouri State. And Brock Annexted transferred to Illinois State. Now, all these guys, there were a couple others that transferred out as well. All of these guys weren't huge contributors. The one that looked extremely promising moving forward was Brady Boyd, who moved on to Texas Tech. But impact-wise, we didn't truly feel it because we hadn't seen them officially on the field much, if at all. Now, let's go straight into the projected depth chart order. Now, first, we've got our guy, Chris Autman-Bell. He is definitely going to be in that wide receiver one role. He has been for the past couple of years, but he has been dealing with a nagging injury. Now, we saw flashes with Chris Autman-Bell in 2019 when he was working with Rashad Bateman and Tyler Johnson. Then in 2020, we saw Bateman and Chris Autman-Bell, where Bateman took on that number one receiver role. And then last year was the year where we were going to see Chris Autman-Bell really step into that wide receiver one role and prove he's the next guy to launch into that NFL pick. Didn't go according to plan because he did suffer from injuries. He was hampered by it throughout the season, so we didn't see the best production from him, but he does have the talent. He does have the ability. He has been working with Coach Simon to get the most of his ability, and I think that he does have the upside of an NFL guy, but I wouldn't put him quite in that tier of Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman at all. Now, Tyler Johnson's draft stock took a hit due to workout concerns as far as the whole draft process and not staying in shape. And it was a weird whole debacle that dropped him to the 5th or 6th. I think it was the 5th round. And honestly, Chris Autman-Bell will get looks from the NFL. He'll get at least a camp invite, but I don't know if he has quite made any real solidifying standard to prove he'll get drafted. I don't think right now he is a lock to be drafted, not even in the 7th round. This season will be key to helping try to vault his name into maybe a day 3 guy that can get an opportunity with the team. But regardless, I think no matter what, he'll at least get a camp invite, regardless of drafted or not. Now, he's coming back from injury. Like I said, it'll be a welcome sight. He has the talent to put up those big numbers, but we just need to see it. He's a crisp route runner. He can win a contested catch, and he seems to have the field IQ, so he'll be a welcome sight coming back for his final year of eligibility. The Encore Four, as PJ Fleck calls them, and Tanner Morgan, Chris Autman-Bell, Mo Ibrahim, and John Michael Schmitz. Well, he's one of those four, and we truly expect him to take a step forward as not only a leader, but in production when it comes to the wide receiver room. Now, opposite him in that starting wide receiver role will be Dalen Wright. That is the next guy we need to talk about. Again, someone that has the talent to put up massive numbers. He might be the most talented in the room. And if I had to make a call on the next Gopher receiver to get drafted, it would be Dalen Wright. Dalen Wright has that talent and that level of ability. You constantly hear coaches, PJ Fleck, Coach Simon, talking about, man, some of the things that Wright does, you go, wow, how? Like, he has that ability, that game-breaking ability, but he's been so inconsistent to date so far. Now, it's all about gaining consistency, and he will be the first to admit that. He's shown the ability in flashes, and it was fantastic, but he's been inconsistent, and he admits that. His coaches have said that and owned up to that. And you know what? So next, it's just taking the step to find that consistency and be the level of talent he can be each and every game, not just in flash plays. Also, that being said, there were things that were going on off the field for him that he was dealing with. So hopefully he now has been able to lock in. He's used this offseason. I've had Twitter chats with his dad on and off in quick posts, and they've tagged me in some things. Dalen Wright, he's retweeted and talked. They're ready, folks. They are ready to show that he's been putting in the work. He's been grinding, and not only him and his camp are putting it out there, but the fans are starting to buy in. And not only that, but he got a off-season shout out from the Footwork King himself on Twitter. Now, the Footwork King has worked with wide margin of very, very talented NFL players. He's worked with Ezekiel Elliott, Odell Beckham Jr. And these are guys that the phrase is slow feet don't eat, folks. Dalen Wright has been putting in the work and the time to take that step up. And honestly, I truly think he could be the wide receiver one on this team. Now, Crab will likely get the first shot at that and will get the respect due to the time that he spent with the program. But Dalen Wright's just natural given talent could allow him to shine through if he puts it all together. And he is my most underrated receiver in the conference, in my opinion, and has the ability to be one of the best receivers in the conference. Now, maybe not up there with your Ohio State guys, but in that next tier of guys, I think Dalen Wright can be right there. So exciting player to have, exciting player to see, and hopefully he can put it all together and thrive this season. Now, next on the list, outside of those two starting, is looking at who is your starting slot receiver and or playing that wide receiver 3 position. I do believe that this will be a camp battle, one to keep an eye on. The battle for slot receiver and wide receiver 3 will be between Daniel Jackson and Michael Brown-Stephens. This is a big camp battle, in my opinion, and it seemed as though this was Jackson's role for the taking last year. But in the spring, it looked like Michael Brown-Stephens was being schemed specifically to use and give opportunities which could carry into the season this year. And he was productive last year as well. So I think Daniel Jackson being a higher recruit coming in and whatnot, there's always been, hope for him to be that next guy up. But Michael Brown-Stephens isn't going away. He is talented, he can get it done, and he's versatile. And that is something that stands out for him. Both will likely be worked in the offense regardless, but who will take over into that lead slot receiver option? That's what you got to keep an eye out for in camp, and we'll be sure to keep you posted on the show as we hear more. Now, not only is this a big battle to watch, so that way we can see if it carries into the season, but it's a big role as well because Chris Autman-Bell is going to be done after this year. His eligibility will be up, and Dalen Wright could walk right into that wide receiver 1 position next year, which if he doesn't have a phenomenal, fantastic season to make the jump, he will step into that wide receiver 1 role. But if he does, if he has an outlying game-breaking season in Dalen Wright, that means Chris Autman-Bell and Dalen Wright could both leave the team. And that leaves Daniel Jackson and Michael Brown-Stephens both needing to step up. Whoever can step up and show flashes right away could be a guy that gets more a focus in the offense, gets schemed more for in the offense. Now, we've seen schemes in the offense for Michael Brown-Stephens in the spring game, so we'll see how that plays out. But this battle between these two guys is key, because if Dalen Wright stays, one of these two guys could take the next step into that lead starting role. So looking at the spring game this past season, Michael Brown-Stephens, I keep talking about his spring game and how he was schemed. Now, listen to this. He had 10 targets in the game. 10 targets. And that came with Tanner Morgan at quarterback. That came with Cole Kramer at quarterback. That came with him coming out of the backfield, taking snaps as a running back. He was all over the field. 10 targets, 50 yards, plus 4 carries for 26 yards. Used all over, used like a Swiss Army knife. And if that usage carries into the season, he could be a very key and very valuable piece for the Gophers moving forward. So Michael Brown-Stephens is definitely a name to keep an eye on as we move forward. Those 4 guys are the core 4 when it comes to this wide receiver room. They will take a majority of the snaps from the wide receiver positions. They will see a majority of the targets given to the wide receiver positions. And that's how it'll move moving forward. But who is next in this room, next in line, if there is an injury, if there is illness, if there is COVID, who knows what goes on? Who is the next in line to step up? Well, I believe there's a tier of 4 guys that will be looked at to step up in that case. It could be Ike White, LeMahieu Brockington, and Christian Hoskins, and Dino Kaliakmanis. Those are the next 4, I believe, that step up when it comes to if someone goes down or if opportunity presents itself. LeMahieu has been mentioned as a guy who was great off the field, learning the X's and O's as a true freshman last year. He just needed time to develop. Well, he had a year, and he could take more of this year to continue that development. But it mentioned he was coming back from an injury this offseason from PJ Fleck at the Big Ten Media Days. So he is a full go for camp, but he will likely be slowly ramped back up into things. Now, Ike White is my guess for the first guy up after our top 4. He saw tons of usage in the spring game. Now, tons might be a stretch, but he saw a lot for a true early enrollee freshman. Again, he's an early enrollee, which gives him a foot up on Hoskins, who just joined the program this summer, heading into 2022. And in the spring game, he had 2 receptions for 27 yards plus 5 targets total, and he had a rushing attempt. So again, someone similar to Michael Brown-Stephens, where they're using him all over the field in different aspects. And that was as an early enrollee, true freshman. That's exciting, and that is something gives reason to why I believe he would be the first one to be looked at after those 4. Now, Dino Kaliakmanis, Ethan's brother, he will fight to try to earn his way onto the depth chart. If I had to guess, I would say he'll likely be involved in maybe special teams and the top guy when it comes to scout team reps and putting on examples of whoever our weekly opponent is that week. He could take that opportunity and run with it and build upon it and really gain the attention to hopefully see time next season and see his opportunity on the depth chart next season, when his brother is also likely to take over that starting quarterback position. But it'll be something to at least see if we see that progression from Kaliakmanis and taking a step into maybe a bigger role, a special teams role, or what have you. Then lastly, of this grouping of players, we have Christian Hoskins. He is a speed guy, a speed demon. He may be the fastest guy on the entire roster. Now, that brings an element to this wide receiver room and to our passing game that no one else is really able to bring. And if he learns the playbook quick, like we said, he's in a summer join, so he wasn't an early enrollee. He just joined this summer. This fall will be his first full actual team practice reps. So if he learns the playbook quickly, he could possibly see some opportunities, but I would expect him to more be involved in the 2023 season. But that game-breaking speed is something that the team hasn't had and doesn't have outside of him. So maybe he could get some work and some opportunities depending on how quickly he grasps that playbook and his responsibilities. Now, after that grouping of four, Clay Gary would obviously be my next guy to step up. He saw a lot of time over the past few years on special teams work. He'll likely see special teams work again this year. He's gotten some game action. In 2020, he had like 5 receptions for 50 yards. So he has seen some snaps at the wide receiver role. So he could be a guy that, if needed, could be called upon. I wouldn't be surprised if you see Hoskins actually step up into special teams roles right away, maybe as a returner too, with that game-breaking speed. Just wanted to throw that out there. But those are the guys that I could see potentially getting any reps at the receiver-specific position. Now, after them, you've got Quentin Redding, Cade Kozamias, Evan Redding, Zach Jorgensen. All those guys are preferred walk-ons. Again, similar to what we said with the running backs in yesterday's episode, they're likely to get a lot of scout work, and you won't really see much of them when it comes to reps in games. Even on the special team side, you probably won't see too much unless they are making standout effort plays in practice. But you probably won't see a lot from those preferred walk-on guys, especially early on in their careers. They could maybe step into some special team opportunities. That is the wide receiver room as a whole. And so let's talk about what that group did on the field last year statistically as a unit. But first, we got to talk about BetOnline. I mentioned it earlier this week, but BetOnline is the source that you want to go to when it comes to looking at over-unders, looking at props, looking at money lines, and they officially have our over-under for total score in our Week 1 game versus New Mexico State. And if I'm being honest, I said this on Monday, but it feels like the number is a bit high. The points for our Week 1 game is 55.5 points combined between the two teams. That seems high, in my opinion. The Gophers had 2 games last year in 13 games that went over 55.5. So I would smash that under. That's me personally. Now, maybe the odds makers, as we progress towards the game, are going to see that same trend as well and be like, actually, let's bump that down. So now would be the time to go and look and smash that under and cash in. You can look at all of the first week games over-unders over at BetOnline. You can look at the over-unders for win totals on the entire season over at BetOnline. Plus, they've got live betting, they've got online casino games, and more. So be sure to head on over to BetOnline and check out all the latest trends and actions. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, folks. So we're going to talk about the stats from the wide receiver room as a whole. But first, I want to thank you for making Locked On Gophers your first listen when it comes to Gopher sports. This is the one-stop shop for Gopher sports, and we're building a great community over here. So please hit that subscribe button down there on YouTube. Hopefully you're enjoying the graphics that we're working into some of the YouTube channel. And we're going to continue doing that throughout the season, getting some statistics up there, getting some information, maybe headlines up there. And it's going to be good. It's going to be fun, and it's going to be a great season. So be sure to subscribe on YouTube while you're at it. If you have a Gmail account, you can subscribe to things on YouTube. So that way you can go on YouTube and find your favorite videos. And you can find this one right here, Locked On Golden Gophers, over on YouTube, and hit subscribe for us. Continue to follow along there. So let's talk about the wide receiver unit as a whole. Now, last year, the players individually that are back that contributed last year was Christian Autman-Bell. He was a Big Ten honorable mention last year, even being hurt. He had 36 receptions for 506 yards and 6 touchdowns. Now, that touchdown number is fantastic, and hopefully we see that tick up. I think the yardage will go up as well, being more healthy. Dalen Wright last year only saw 18 receptions, but he had 365 yards and 2 touchdowns. So it shows that he has big playability even on the minimal number of receptions. Now, last year, Daniel Jackson started in 8 games. He had 25 receptions for 267 yards and 1 touchdown. And then Michael Brown-Stevens he started in 9 games last year, saw 23 receptions for 392 yards and a touchdown. Now, the only receivers on the team with any receiving yards at all were those 4 guys, and then Brady Boyd, who transferred out, and he had 2 receptions for 18 yards. So, like I said, those core 4 are the guys that are putting together all the production, and it will probably be similar this year, and barring injury. Hopefully we don't have any. But it will be interesting to see who at least gets snaps and gets to take that next in line role when it comes to snaps, even if they're just play blocking or run blocking, even if they're just decoy routes, it doesn't matter. It'll be very interesting to see who earns that next available spot on the depth chart. Now, with the passing numbers looking to tick up from last year, which was very, very poor last year, we've already talked about that from the quarterback end of things, but since those will all likely see bumps, I think these guys will all see bumps in their receiving production as well. I don't know if we'll have a 1,000-yard receiver, but we could see people get close. I could see Chris Autman-Bell getting 800 yards, give or take, and a good chunk of touchdowns like you saw last year. I could see Dalen Wright getting around that 700-yard mark. I could see Jackson and Michael Brown-Stevens both coming in around that 500-yard mark. I mean, even if you have those 4 guys contributing in that manner, paired with the tight ends and running backs, Tanner Morgan could pass for 3,000 yards again. That the opportunity is there, and you don't even have to have 1,000-yard receivers like we had in Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. Just opening up the pass game and having a wide variety of guys that can take on those receptions in those core 4, like I said, in Brevin Spanford, who we'll talk about in tomorrow's episode with tight ends. You've got a good receiving unit to be throwing the ball to, and I do believe we'll see those numbers tick up. Now, lastly, as a group, statistically last year, this team was 18th in yards per completion. Now, that's not bad, especially when you're talking about a team that didn't pass the ball very much. They were, in attempts, they were only above the Armed Force squad, so Air Force, Navy, and Army. Outside of that, the Gophers were the next team in least pass attempts per game. We didn't pass the ball very much, yet we were still 18th in the entire country. Out of 130 schools, we were 18th in yards per completion at 13.9. Now, again, it's not all dink and dunk. Even with Sanford's very poor offense, now you're pairing it back up with Kirk Shiraka, and that will go a long way. So the potential is there. The room is there for him to throw to. He has options, and this should be a good unit. Maybe not great unit, but it should be a good unit overall. So when we talk about that, where would we rank this unit overall when it comes to the Big Ten and wide receiver rooms? Where does this receiver room stack up? That's what we're going to talk about coming up next. All right, so where would we rank this unit when it comes to wide receivers in the Big Ten? It's obvious, very obvious, that we would be behind Ohio State. Like, that's just a given, where I don't need to debate that. I don't need to list names or anything. That's a given. Maryland with Demas Jr. or Dante Demas Jr. I can't remember which one is which. I think it's Dante Demas Jr. Damon Demas is over at Texas A&M. But he's over at Maryland. He's got that high-level talent. You've got Raheem Jarrett, who's an absolute baller. Maryland's got a better receiving unit as a core than us, I would say. Michigan State has some absolute studs over on their receiving unit, and I believe they're going to pass more this year than we saw last year. They don't have a Kenneth Walker. Yes, they've got Jalen Berger. Yes, they've got Jarek Broussard, but those guys aren't Kenneth Walker. I believe they're going to pass more. I believe we saw from Peyton Thorne the ability to pass fairly consistently. And I would expect them to really lean on their guys like Reed to take that next step. I believe they have Geronimo out there still. So it's just like Michigan State's receiving unit is rock solid. And the top level guy and Reed will get them the bump over the Gophers for me. And then you got Michigan. Michigan's not only returning a healthy amount of guys that played meaningful minutes last year, guys like Ronnie Bell, but they've also got some very key recruits coming in, 4-star guys, multiple 4-star guys. They've got Darius Clemens coming in. They've got Tyler Morris coming in, even though he's coming back from an injury. They've got another freshman out there that's been standing out. So I do believe, paired with the young talent and the 2 or 3 vets that came back with their production, I would put Michigan above the Gophers. So those 4 are clearly in front of the Gophers when it comes to receivers. Now, we might also be slightly behind Penn State, who's got Parker Washington leading the room. They've got a handful of guys as well that are really good. They've got Caden Saunders, the number 7 receiver recruit in the 2022 class, joining them. So again, they've got that top-notch talent. So I'd put them above the Gophers. After that, you're looking at Wisconsin, Iowa, Indiana, Illinois, Rutgers. I think all of those schools are behind the Gophers pretty easily. And so that puts us right in the middle of the pack when we're talking about receivers as a unit. But where does it put us between Purdue, Northwestern, Nebraska, and Minnesota? I think that is the 4 that you really have to look at. Purdue's got Brock Thompson coming back. They've got Tyrone Tracy coming from Iowa, who wasn't used efficiently enough. His talent wasn't used over at Iowa. And let me tell you, Braum is going to use him. Aiden O'Connell is going to find him. And so that room is talented. Now, prior to their lead receiver becoming ineligible academically, I would have put them above the Gophers. But right now, I have them about neck and neck. And I'm going to give the Gophers the bump because Chris Autman-Bell is going to be fully healthy. So I'm giving the Gophers the bump over Purdue. And then I think Nebraska and Northwestern are behind us and Purdue. So that officially puts us in the rankings as Ohio State 1, Maryland 2, Michigan State 3, Michigan 4, Penn State 5. I've got Minnesota and Purdue tied at 6th, which then moves Nebraska to 8th, Northwestern to 9th, Rutgers to 10th, Illinois 11th, Indiana 12th, Iowa 13th, and Wisconsin 14th. Now think about that, folks. Wisconsin and Iowa have some of the worst wide receivers in the entire Big Ten West, in the entire Big Ten. They've got some of the worst quarterbacks in the entire Big Ten West and Big Ten, but they're consistently put above the Gophers in a lot of media polls and a lot of preseason rankings coming out and a lot of division winners. I don't get it. Even if you take my fandom and my maybe slight bias for the Gophers away and you move them down behind Purdue, behind Nebraska, in line with Northwestern, so at about that 9th or 10th, we're still well above the Iowa and the Wisconsin in the receivers category. If you bump Tanner Morgan down a position or 2, I believe he finished 7th for us in the conference, bump him down to 9th. Mertz came in at 10th or 11th, and Petrus came in at like 12th or 13th. Then you look at our running back rooms, I was still lacking there. Get excited for the Big Ten West. This is our chance. This is our chance. Now, if you're going off of my ranks in the conference where I'm trying to be neutral, I'm trying to be realistic, I've got Tanner Morgan as the 7th or 8th best quarterback. I've got our running back room as the 3rd to 4th best running back room. And I've got our receivers at the 6th, 7th area when it comes to the conference. So right in the middle of the conference. But we're ahead of our competition. So get excited for this Big Ten West. I truly believe we can win it. That's going to do it for us today on Locked On Golden Gophers. Tomorrow we're talking tight ends. We'll close out the week with offensive line. I'll give a mini episode this week on our basketball updates. We lost Isaiah Enan this week, unfortunately, and it's crazily, but we'll talk about that more coming up later this week. We'll talk about the new commit to the Gophers basketball program in a mini episode later this week as well, so stay tuned. But we're wrapping up the offensive position breakdowns this week. Have a good one. I'll see you tomorrow.